Welcome to the J&J Show. I'm Jeff, he's Jerry, and tonight we're going to be talking about the 1,000 year reign of Jesus. And Jerry, you had mentioned a couple of things last episode about that 1,000 year reign, and we've kind of talked about it before and we've touched on it, but I thought it would be a good idea for what you said brought up questions with me, and I'm sure other people who've listened also have questions. And I just thought that we could go over some questions. Some of them are my personal questions. Some of them are questions, I thought of that other people might have. So I thought maybe we could do that this episode and kind of shed some light on that 1,000 year reign and what to expect. And obviously, it's gonna be glorious as Jesus reigns as it should have been all along. So the what you mentioned was in the last episode was that we will be continuing our lives will continue as they are now. And I guess my first question for you was where well, before we get into any specifics, is where did you get your information about the 1,000 year reign of Jesus and
Well,
what
there's only
places
one
in the Bible?
place. Yeah, it's actually in there. The millennium is mentioned in there a lot more than people realize. I've heard it said that it's mentioned more than anything else in prophecy. I don't know if that's true. I'm not really a millennium expert by any stretch, um, but it is something that I've read on and tried to pay attention to as much as possible. Um, it is something that's very important because I see it as one of the real prizes for the believer that we're going to really get to enjoy. It's Christians a lot of times think of you know this life and then heaven, and there obviously there's truth in that, but the millennium gets left out, and that's really for us a much bigger part of our future at this point in time than really even heaven is. And and like I said, I can only provide some details as I've seen them in the Bible, and like some things in prophecy, it can be some of these things can be interpreted in different ways. Um, but that's the main source as far as our lives continuing, and they certainly will, but it'll be very different. Even though our lives, even though Earth will continue, it will not be just us as we are getting older and older and older. We will have new bodies, glorified bodies. We will be um, definitely increased in terms of our knowledge, of our abilities, and we will be direct servants of the Lord. Of course, we can get into this in more detail, but I think that a lot of people don't realize that in many ways the earth during the millennium will be very similar to how it is now, and yet it'll also be radically different. So it's um, it's very interesting. We don't know every last detail. We really don't. The Bible, even though it does reference it quite a bit, it doesn't go into chapter after chapter after chapter. It's more snippets here and there that you come across. Some places in Psalms, and some places in Isaiah, and some places in Ezekiel, and you come across it in some places in Revelation. And so, but it's in there, and it's a big part of our future.
And I'm sure as we get to talking and you give your answers, we can maybe shed some more light on what verses and what books
Yeah.
that these things come from. But you mentioned that our lives will go on, and you've also mentioned that people think that there won't be fire or cooking and stuff like that. Why are they wrong? Where did you see that?
That comes from the reason that comes up is because in Ezekiel 39, it talks about Israel after the great invasion that occurs during the tribulation, where God intervenes and destroys Gog and Magog, that the inhabitants of Israel will burn the weapons for 7 years, um, or maybe it's 7 months, 7 months. Um, that they will just burn all these weapons, and that they won't even need to have cooking fires because they'll have these weapons to burn. And I've heard individuals say, "Well, see that," because I truly believe that the Ezekiel 39 is referencing the Armageddon. That is the end, and that the burning of the weapons takes place under the kingdom in which Jesus sets up. There have been folks who said, no, that can't be because there won't be any fires or cooking or anything like that during the millennium because it'll basically be like heaven. But that's not what the Bible describes at all. Without going into reading, I don't want to get on here and just read verse after verse, but as you look into it, you begin to realize that the earth will still have countries, there'll still be nations, there will still be people. There'll be two classes of people: those who were saints in the previous age, like us, and then there'll be those who inhabit the earth. And we don't know exactly who these individuals are going to be that make up the nations. Are they simply the survivors of the tribulation period, the great day of the Lord? Are they just those people who begin to replenish the earth? We just don't know exactly who will make up. We just know that eventually, by the end of the 1,000 years, there will be a ton of people on planet Earth. So many so that the Bible says they'll be like the sand of the sea. Which, if you think about all the sand that is on the floor of the sea and all the beaches, that's a lot of people. So um, it talks about. It does seem to indicate in there that society, there will be nations, talks about that, because all the nations will be subject to the ruler of this earth, who will be Jesus. His kingdom will be out of Jerusalem, it says all the nations and all the families will come at a certain time a year to pay homage to the Lord, and that the saints, those of us who have been saved prior to his return, will be his servants. And so we will be, and Jesus refers to this in some of his parables, that we will be his administrators, and we will be his, almost like his elect, is a term that's also used in the Bible. And so this is a lot of the things I believe that we go through now, that we wonder, why does the Lord care if we have endurance? Why does the Lord care if we gain wisdom? What difference does it make if we're just going to heaven? Well, the reason why is because we're still going to be us during the millennium. When we go to heaven, our bodies change, but our personalities and who makes us is still the same. People who've had near-death experiences talk about this a lot. When they go to heaven, even some of those who have experienced hell, they stress, I was still myself. I didn't become somebody else. I was my personality, my thoughts, and that will be the same going into eternity. You are who you are. That's who the Lord made you. You don't become an angel who's completely different after this age. You will be who you are. You'll have a perfected body. You won't be tempted by sin. But the Lord wants us to gain and to be improved in terms of gaining patience and wisdom in these things, because we're going to need that while we're serving him during the millennium. And there'll be a lot of responsibilities. It's not going to be work. It's not going to be stress or anything like that. But it's going to be a very special time. It's going to be, the earth is going to be very the way it always should have been. Things are going to be as they should have been all along.
When you say that, like they should have been all along, you're referring to the Garden of Eden, like Adam and Eve, when
Right.
before the fall, before they were tempted and they introduced sin to the world, correct?
Right. Yep.
We're still going to have our human physical forms. Will we have our perfect bodies during the millennium, or is that
Yes. Yep.
okay? And
Certainly will.
you mentioned a few minutes ago about how it's a common misconception that when we die we become angels in heaven, but yeah, I've heard a lot of the same things that you just mentioned. That people, I was still myself. I still remembered my life. I still,
Yeah.
and it's said that we'll know each other when we get to heaven. We'll remember our families, and we remember our past lives. And you mentioned Sorry, what was the point you were going to make? I mentioned about Adam and Eve and us living
Well,
before the sin.
yeah, the Garden of Eden, in terms of us having direct communion with the Lord. There'll no longer be, right now, as you and I have discussed, we're in the age of faith, where we have faith in the Lord. We don't get to see Him directly. That will no longer be the case during the millennium. We'll be able to see Him directly. Um, it's not exactly like the Garden of Eden. I mean, I don't think people be walking around with no clothes on or anything like that. So it's not 100% translation of the Garden of Eden, but it's very similar. There won't be there won't be, I can't say there won't be any disobedience, because the millennium is interesting because it's still the earth and it's going to be extremely good. However, for those individuals, those people I was talking about that inhabit the earth, there still will be death during the millennium. Not for us, not for the saints or the elect, but for the inhabitants of the nations. But life will go back to being like it was before Noah's flood, because it says in Isaiah that he who dies at the age of 100 will be considered as having been a child who's passed away. So to die at 100 will be the equivalent now of dying as an infant. So that tells us that the lives are going to be very long during the millennium. There will not be Satan. Satan will be bound, so he won't be tempting people. So you can't say there really won't be any disobedience at all, but you get the impression that it'll be rare. For example, the Lord talks in there about if a nation fails to come to pay homage to Jesus, that he'll deal with them with a pretty swiftly punishment wise. And it says he'll rule the nations with a rod of iron. And so you get the impression that it'll be about as close to perfect as you can get, but there still will be free will. There just won't be the Satan tempting people to constantly do evil, and our sinful natures will be. We won't have them anymore. The saints, the humans that are on the earth at the time, we just don't really know what humans will be like without the enemy tempting them constantly. And so it's I don't claim to have every single answer on this. There's a lot that we really don't know. We can only surmise, and there's plenty of this that I could be wrong about. But it's going to be a very interesting time, and it's something that I did have one dream one time that I still feel I've never really felt like I've had a pure rapture dream as such, but I do feel like I had a very brief millennium dream one time. And when I say brief, it was brief, but it was extremely interesting. And I was in a mall, walking through a mall, and it felt like it was late morning. It wasn't real busy, but there were people in it. And it felt for some reason during this dream like I was in Israel. It just felt like that's the part of the world that I was in. I don't think I was living there. I don't know if I was visiting or what the case may be, because it does say that we will go up to Jerusalem. But that doesn't say that mean that we're all going to live there necessarily. And in this dream, I was just very aware in this mall that things were different as I was walking. I remember there was a mother and a daughter walking through the mall. I guess they had been shopping or whatnot. And things were just different. There wasn't that darkness that, that even if you don't see it, it's out there in the current time period. It was a place where, and it seems like briefly in the dream, I was also outside the mall. And it was a place where, like, if I don't know what type of transportation we'll have in the millennium, whether there'll be vehicles or what, but if something were to go wrong, you could just ask anybody to help you, and you wouldn't have to worry about whether they were a kook or whether they were going to attack you or mug you. It was just different. And this dream was very quick, didn't last long. But when I woke up, I was aware that it was something different. And the only thing I could think of is that had to have been the millennium, and because of the way it felt. And it was I've been pretty excited about the millennium ever since.
You mentioned, believers know this, and I just kind of want to point this out for maybe non-believers who could be listening. When you say Jesus will rule with a rod of iron, that's not a dictatorship. He's not going to rule
Right.
like a dictator. He's a king, a benevolent uh, kind king, like what should have been all along. Not like these king tyrants that you hear about, like Henry VIII, chopping off his wife's heads because they didn't give him sons or whatever. But I believe that was Henry VIII. But nothing like that. He's going to be Jesus, but he's going to be the ruler of the earth, just as it's stated. And I just want to point that out. It's definitely not a dictatorship. He's not going to rule with an iron fist. So,
Right.
um, you mentioned that you said the believers, us, the Christians, right, will be the saints in his administration, and the people. Sorry, I kind of missed that at the beginning. I know you mentioned that. You said they'll be the people left over from the tribulation, maybe those who got
That's
saved
one
during the
theory.
tribulation, or
That's well, no, those who get saved in tribulation will be saints during
they'll be saints
the
too.
millennium.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's where the mystery comes in. We don't really know who these individuals will be. There was a time, in theorizing that I thought perhaps they will be the people that died without ever hearing the gospel in places like New Guinea or Africa or whatnot. Maybe they'll be, but I don't think so because there is no reincarnation, and so I kind of discounted that theory. And to be honest, I guess they, probably just the survivors of the 3.5 year tribulation, because it's often said 7 years, but like we've said before, the Bible's pretty clear that only 3.5 years is going to be the really awful, terrible part where the Lord is pouring out his wrath. And there won't be many survivors of that. So um, it's kind of a mystery. I really don't. It's one of those things the Bible doesn't really say. So when it doesn't say, we really shouldn't. All we can do is kind of wonder. But we don't really know where. We know that mankind can reproduce pretty quickly. So they're probably, if only I think like not even a third of mankind is supposed to survive the 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 tribulation, and so that's 1 in 3. And I think even that's probably a little generous. I think it ends up being far less than that. And in one place it says that people will be very rare after it's all over with. So I really don't know, who they're going to be, or where they come from. Um, there is some thought that a lot of the prophecy refers to the area of the Middle East mostly. And if that's the case, then and a lot of the people that believe in the Muslim Antichrist theory believe that when Revelation talks about the entire world, it's really talking about the area of the Middle East. So if that were to be the case, then there conceivably could be a lot more people left after the 3.5 year tribulation in other parts of the world. Um, I just don't know. It's very fun to think about. It's interesting to wonder about, but um, I don't subscribe to that theory myself, because as you see right now, how the nations are turning against Israel. You name a country and they're having anti-Israel protests as we speak, and the Lord's not going to pass on that. I mean, he's going to come against that. He is not, anybody who has hatred for Israel is going to be in a bad way. And so it's not like it's only occurring in the Middle East, it's occurring around the world.
It really is. Um, and you mentioned something I probably should have touched on at the beginning of the episode. Everything we talk about, as usually with every episode we do, it's not we're not saying this stuff is fact. This is just what we've surmised from our readings and our gift of discernment, and this is all just what you've pieced together. So we're not saying these are hard and fast rules, and that this is definitely how it's going to be. This is just us kind of speculating. I mean, there are certain parts where the Bible says certain things that we do know will be true,
Yeah. Right.
but the other stuff is just, it's just that's why we're here. That's why we have a podcast.
Yeah.
We're talking. We like to speculate. We like to go over certain things that remain untouched, so to speak, in churches and in the when people talk about the gospel, because like you said, they like to hit the high points, Jesus, which is warranted. You want to talk about Jesus as much as possible. You want to talk about our eternal lives in heaven, but like you said, before that comes the 1,000 year reign, and I don't really feel like it's talked about a lot, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this episode and focus on that, because it's really something that people kind of overlook. And it's like you said, it's going to be glorious. The fact that, like, I didn't even think about the fact that you said that we'll be able to see God and communicate with him. How amazing is that going to be?
Right.
We live in darkness right now, basically, other than, a few times when he speaks directly to us, but it's not his voice. We'll actually be able to see his face and hear
Yeah.
his voice, and we'll, like you said, we'll be able to go to Jerusalem and see Jesus whenever we want to. How amazing is that going to be?
Yeah.
To and you mentioned dying during the 1,000 years, and it says anybody who passes away at 100 would be deemed unlucky. Um,
Yeah.
Not unlucky. Luck's not a good
Yeah.
word to use, but like you
That's,
said, be deemed
that's right.
but and that kind of is like it made me wonder, am I gonna die? What if I die at 90 and I don't get to experience the full effect of the 1,000 years? I mean, that's kind of a selfish thought, but at the same time, it's like I want to be there for it. I want
Oh
to
yeah. Well,
experience all of it and
you
just
will
soak it
be.
all in. So yeah, that's a comforting thought to know that we'll be saints and we will live throughout the full 1,000 years and beyond in heaven.
Yeah.
So that was just a very comforting thought, and a couple of things I thought of while you were saying. The next question that I had, let's see, is about our families and our pets and our loved ones who have already passed away. And you kind of touched on this before already. You said that when we come back, there's going to be people that number, like the sands in the seas. And if you think about how much of this world is actually ocean, and at the bottom of that ocean is sand, and then you got the beaches with all the sand. You go to the beach and you get just a minimal view of all the sand in the world from the
Right.
shore, from the water line to where it stops on land. To think that it stretches across the bottoms of the seas, there's going to be that many people, and we'll all fit, right? We'll all still
Yeah.
have plenty of room to move around and everything. And so I'm safe to assume that when we come back, because we'll be raptured up, and then we'll come back for the 1,000 year reign.
That's right.
Our families, our pets. I just listened to a sermon today from David Jeremiah. It's called Shock and Awe, and he said that they had posted some things. I'm thinking on his website, and they were asking questions, and the one that got the most results and the one that got the most feedback and questions were about animals, about their pets. And he said that we know that there will be horses in heaven, and he said that
That's right.
dogs will be there too. But then he joked about cats not being there. So,
That's right.
but no, then cats. He said we'll be there. So our pets will be there. And then there was the I'm going to mention it because I mentioned it every episode. In a rapture dream,
Mhm.
there was a little girl who had a dream about going to heaven, and she saw the house with the sign and her family's name on the sign, and her what came running out at her was her beloved pet hamster who had passed away. So our pets, and I've always subscribed to the thought that God would not give us these creatures, these pets, these companions who we share unconditional love with, that we love so much. Why would we just have them here and not forever, And I've also heard rapture dreams and visions where we'll have things in heaven like that because God wants us to be happy, and He knows what makes us happy, and He'll give us that. Kind of like I mentioned, there was one guy who had a near death experience, and he went to heaven, and the first thing he saw was horses because he loved horses. And he knew, God knew that he loved horses and wanted him to be happy there. So, of course, he sees horses. And then he described a smell. I forget what smell it was. from his childhood that he loved, that brought him great comfort and great joy, and that was
Neat.
the smell that he was greeted with. So if
That's
you
neat.
remember your grandmother's uh, chocolate chip cookies, it may not have been that specific. I believe it was that near death near death experience that I saw that one in, but is either that or another one where someone describes a smell, a comforting smell from like their childhood, and it's all part of God wanting us to be happy and giving us that comfort and that sense of
Yeah.
safety and ease because I believe it was because he was he was scared because he died. He went to the bright light, in the sky, and he sees horses, he smells that smell, and all of a sudden he's just at ease. He didn't want to leave. Yeah, I mean, why would you? So um we'll come back, our families will come back, our loved ones who have passed away will come back, along with
Right.
you know everyone throughout history. I guess we'll be walking the earth with the disciples. So
Yep.
that's a fun thought too, right? So dude, um I guess I just answered my own questions there, but was there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah. See, we know this because it says that when the rapture occurs, the dead in Christ will rise first. Those are the saints who have already passed away. Then we who are alive and remain will be caught up together with the Lord, and thus we shall always be with him. So that answers that one verse, spells it out right there, that people, our family members who have died before us, are going to be caught up in the rapture first. We're going to follow them up, and then both groups will be with the Lord forever. So that right there, when the Lord returns in the second coming, we're coming with him. We're not staying in heaven because it says we will be with the Lord forever. That means we will never be separated from him again. So when he's ruling here on planet Earth, we will be with him, and so will our loved ones that have known the Lord. And so, as for the pets, I'm a big believer that the Lord will bring us back together with them. As far as the millennium goes, I can only speculate. I don't know because see what happens is after the millennium, after the 1,000 years, it says that Satan will be loosed from prison for a brief period. The reason for that is because the people who are on the earth, who have been living for a long time, those generations will basically not have chosen the Lord of their own free will. They will have been born into the millennium. And so it's important that those who inherit eternal life in heaven had chosen the Lord of their own free will. So the devil will be released. Revelation says the devil will be released for a brief period in order to tempt the nations. And a great many people on the earth at that time will follow him. And it says they will come up on outside of Jerusalem, um, a great number of them, and they will, the Lord will send down fire and consume the enemies of the Lord, and then the devil and his angels will be grabbed and thrown into the lake of fire. We don't know. The Revelation makes this war seem like it's very quick. We don't know if it's just a week or if that plays out for a number of years or what. We just don't know. So it's uh, that's how the millennium finishes, and then it says after that, that's when heaven is basically brought down, and there'll be a new heaven and a new earth. The Lord will remake. And because you might wonder, well, the Lord said he left after his crucifixion, he went into heaven. He told us that he was going to prepare a place for us. So it might seem kind of funny that, okay, we're going to be raptured and go to heaven and just get to enjoy that for the briefest period before we return with him. We'll never get to enjoy heaven. Well, what happens is that after the millennium, heaven basically becomes, there's a new heaven and a new earth, and it basically comes down and becomes the new earth. And this is all spelled out in Revelation pretty clearly. And so that's how that basically plays out. And so if you had any other questions.
Um, one that came to mind was jobs. Like we have to go to our normal 9 to 5 now, and I'm assuming that will be no more.
From what we can tell, it will be no more. We don't know how much it does talk in there about uh, each man will basically live under his own um, vineyard and will basically that's kind of a from what I can tell a Hebrew idiom for life will be very good. And so we really don't know, how that plays out. I had a whole bunch of verses. I got them right here actually that talk about these. I just didn't want to, sit here and read. Let's see if I have that one to that. Yeah, one talks about the saints will judge the world when we return with the Lord. Oh, here it is. It's in Isaiah 65. If anyone's interested, Isaiah 65 has a lot on this. But verse 21 says, they will build houses and dwell in them. They will plant vineyards and eat their fruit. No longer will they build houses and others live in them, or plant and others eat. For as the days of a tree, so will be the days of my people, which trees live hundreds of years. Actually, some of the redwoods and whatnot can live up to 600-700 years. My chosen ones will long enjoy the work of their hands. So 9 to 5 grinds, yeah, that will be a thing of the past. However, we will still have purposes and missions, but the work that we do, in as much as it is work, that will be stuff that we really love to do. So it won't be work. It'll be basically a mission or a purpose is what we will follow. And we don't know exactly what that'll be. For some, it'll be different. Some people may be in charge of cities, like Jesus talked about. Others, it may be, they might be in charge of a vineyard, or who knows, whatever makes them happy mostly, whatever they're suited for. There'll be different rewards for different Christians. And a lot of that is determined by our lives right now. That's why it's important for us to be mindful of the future, not be carnal minded. To be carnal minded is to be focused strictly on earth right now and this current life, um, and not think about the future that is to come, because there's a lot that we do now that plays out in the future.
Yeah, when we say work, it's not going to be like strenuous or stressful. We're not going to have to grind to get by, not to have to live paycheck to paycheck. It's like you said, it's going to be something that we love. And it's often said that if you find a job that you love, it's like not working at all. If you're lucky enough to do something that you love, then it's not like working at all. And I kind of picture that based on what you just said, how it's going to be. So it's not like it's going to be strenuous and tiring and come home
Yeah,
really tired after a long day. So not gonna be anything like that. When we say work, we don't mean work like that. So
right. Because you'll have perfect bodies that won't get tired. I mean, so you're going to be approaching it completely different with a
right.
different attitude entirely.
All right. Well, that's the main questions I had. I'm sure some more will pop up as we continue along. But you said you had a list of verses there. Instead of reading them out one by one, because like you said, people don't want to tune in for that, and that could get kind of boring. But did you want to just read one, and then we could discuss and go over it and
Sure.
move on to the next one? I'm sure that would bring up some more questions as well as we
Right.
continue.
Well, Psalm 20, this is one I came across just the other day, actually, reading through the Psalms, which is not a place you would typically think of coming across a millennium verse. But this is fairly brief, but it's pretty typical of what you come across when it talks about, the Bible talks about the millennium. And it's Psalm chapter 22, and it starts in verse 27, and it says, all the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations will worship before you. For the kingdom is the Lord's, and he rules over the nations. All the prosperous of the earth will eat and worship. All those who go down to the dust will bow before him, even he who cannot keep his soul alive. Posterity will serve him. It will be told of the Lord to the coming generation. They will come, they will declare his righteousness to a people who will be born, that he has performed it. So, what you're seeing there basically is it's talking about how the Lord will be in charge of planet Earth, that all the nations will be aware of the Lord. It will not no longer be a thing where He can't be seen or heard from. And it's even references in there that some of the inhabitants of the earth will still pass away, but even those who go down to the dust will know of the Lord. And just very interesting. Again, that's Psalms 22. Another thing I heard that was very interesting, people may not be aware of, is that the Christmas carol, "The Joy to the World," is filled. It's basically talking about the millennium period. If you look at the lyrics of that song, it's talking about the millennium period, because much of what is in that song, and I thought about this as I was reading this, when you read about stuff that hasn't happened yet. I mean, obviously, all the families of the earth right now do not worship the Lord, so that's coming at a future time. And much of the song "Joy to the World" is the same way.
That's funny. I'm sitting here trying to sing it in my head, so go over the lyrics just to see. You had mentioned that the believers, Christians, will become saints. What verse did that come from?
Um, the um, the reference to saints is in Revelation, and it's actually there at the end. I'll pull it up here real quick when it talks about the Satan being released and coming up on the broad plain of the earth. The Bible says, which gives you the impression that it will be a large area, I guess, around Jerusalem. When it says the broad plain of the earth, we don't really know exactly what that means, but it says, when the 1,000 years are completed, Satan will be released. He will come out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog. And it goes on. It says, and they will come up on the broad plain of the earth and surround the camp of the saints and the beloved city. And fire came down from heaven and devoured them. So, and then it talks about the devil who deceived those people will be thrown into the lake of fire. So, Revelations is the book that refers to those who are the Lord's servants during the millennium as being saints. Of course, there's a lot of other verses as well throughout the Bible that refers to us as the saints. It's just a term for his elect or believers, Christians.
Right. So that verse doesn't mean that we'll be living in Jerusalem, right? It said the camp.
It's exactly. It seems to
Mhm.
be the impression you get. Remember earlier I said I don't know how long that conflict is only mentioned in one verse, so we tend to think, well, it must be very quick. Well, it may not be, and it may be that during this revolt, which is what it is, Satan is released and tempts the nations, and a large number of at least some generations, probably the younger generations, will follow after Lucifer in this rebellion. It does appear that those who are the Lord's will collapse on Jerusalem and head into a defensive area, is the only thing you can kind of speculate, where they will hold up against the rebellion. And before there's any sort of a war, the Lord says God sends down fire from heaven and devours them. So there is no battle, there is no war. It's just they're terminated, and that's it. And so it's again, it goes over. It's pretty brief. It's kind of vague as far as what Revelation says about that. It's kind of just tacked on at the end.
Maybe I just had a thought that maybe you said the plane of the earth, and you said that or the earth or the world,
The earth is what it says.
the earth. Well, either way, you said that sometimes that it can be taken in the Bible that when it talks about the world, it means the Middle East around Israel and Jerusalem. So maybe it says he will surround the plane. Is it perhaps maybe he calls us to Jerusalem, and when you call an army, they have camp.
Right.
So
Right.
I mean, that's purely speculation on my part. That's
Sure.
just a thought that came into my mind when you said that. So perhaps he calls us to Jerusalem in the circumference around where the devil will and his armies will surround to keep us safe from the fire raining
Sure.
down. I don't know. I just had that thought pop
And
into
we
my
don't
head.
even
So
know. We don't even know. There may be a large number of people who are inhabitants of the earth, people of the nations, not you and I, and are not saints, but there may be a large number of the population of the earth that stays loyal to the Lord. The Bible doesn't reference that, so we really don't know what percentage of the inhabitants of the earth are tempted or led away by Satan. It could just be a third of the population. It could be. I don't think it's going to be all. That wouldn't really kind of jibe with the other stuff we see in the Bible and in history, but there will be a percentage, and the Bible says that there are a lot of them. So there will be a large number of those who follow after Satan and are deceived into following him, just like we've seen throughout the ages, and they will be destroyed. There won't be any compassion on them because they will have seen the Lord. They will know righteousness, and they will yet choose Satan, just like the fallen angels did, the one third that followed Satan.
It's funny you mentioned that because um, in my reading of the Bible, I've come back to Jeremiah, and it's the beginning of the book where it's talking about the Lord judging Israel for betraying him and for choosing other gods over him for I guess betray is the right word, for turning their backs on him, for straying yet again. 'Cause if there's one thing they do, it is definitely stray. Uh, and he talks about how he likens it to a wedding. He loves that image, the wedding, and he likens it to a bride who betrays her spouse and who goes out after others who wanders. And he talks about how they made their choice, and now they're going to have to face that choice that they made. And it kind of reminds me of like you said, Satan leading the world astray. If that's not more evident in this day and age, then I don't know what else is. But it seems to be happening way more now than, and openly out in the open too. So they will have their judgment, and all we can do is try to warn them. But I thought of a couple of more questions. You were talking about the people of the earth, and we were talking about where they come from, and obviously they're not the saints. Will we still have children or reproduce? You said our lives will go on as normal. Will
Yeah,
we
that
still marry? Will we still reproduce? Are these our children? If we do and they're born, will they automatically be saints? Will we have to save them like we were saved and share the gospel with them? And do free will? Do they choose or not choose the Lord? Perhaps are they part of the people who will stray?
that's a
Does it
great
say anything
question.
about that?
Nope, that would have to be pure speculation. I could tell you that right off the bat, most people would knee jerk and say that the saints will not procreate or have families or anything like additional families or anything like that. But I've just learned not to assume. We just don't know. Um, it seems to me, I just don't know. It, it's a very good question that you ask, and I've spent a lot of
Well,
time thinking about it.
if it's not a topic you want to, if it's
No,
one
no,
you'd rather move on from because you don't want to like speculate and say the wrong thing, and
no, 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 not
then
at
we
all. I
can. But
think it's.
okay.
I love to think about it. I think it's a very good question, and if it was up to me, I would say that all saints who enter the millennium as young people will be allowed to have that experience and to have make their own families, um, and that those saints who enter the millennium with families already will continue with those families. That's what I would hope, but that means absolutely nothing because I could be 100% wrong. That's just how, in my imagination, how I would love to see it play out. But um, because I know there are lots of young Christians now who, understandably want to experience that and haven't yet, and the rapture may occur before they do. It would be nice to think that they would get that opportunity in a perfect world, um, where they would be able to. And I just just like with it's very similar to the pet thing. There are plenty of Christians who love to say no, there will be no pets, no animals in heaven. That's not. I've heard some Christians say heaven's going to be so different It won't be anything like that. We won't recognize each other. We'll have no memory of the past. There's a lot of Christians who love to say negative stuff like that to bring other Christians down because they think it makes them seem more spiritual. So because I don't care about such worldly things, I'm more spiritual than other people. It's just you can see right through it. It's just it drives me crazy. And I had a teacher. I may have said this before. I had a teacher in fifth grade. I went to a Christian school, and she told all of us that we'll spend eternity serving God. And well, in a sense, that's true. But when you tell fifth graders that, they don't understand what you mean. So my immediate impression was that I was going to be a waiter for eternity and be carrying trays of food and what. And I
I
was
thought that too.
depressed. I mean, I
I
was so
thought,
disappointed. And I went home and told my dad, and he was like, "No, no, no." And he was so mad. It was like, why would that bonehead teacher tell fifth graders that? Because they don't understand that serving the Lord is a joyful thing where you're doing all kinds of stuff, you know. But she was trying to make it sound like she was excited about something that none of us, because she was more spiritual than us. She was a better Christian. She was happy about just serving, and whereas it's just there's a lot of look at me ism that a lot of Christians engage in, um, and it drives me nuts, absolutely nuts. So that's the only reason why I have real reservations, because I don't want to say certain things, but about the millennium if I don't know. All I can have is a hope. I would hope that that would be the case, but I don't know.
I think that's where the term "holier than thou" comes in.
Right. Definitely.
And in kind of the same vein as what you were just speaking about, I mentioned this before in a previous episode when talking about pets and being in heaven, and I had a parent volunteer. It's not like a parent volunteer Sunday school teacher. I think he was just sitting in one day. I don't even think he was our normal. Well, actually, I know for a fact he wasn't our normal Sunday school teacher when I was a kid. Um, I don't remember how old I was, 7, 8 years old, maybe a little older. And the question came up: will our dogs go to heaven? His answer was no, they won't go to heaven. They don't have souls. So it's like, why are you going to tell a room full of kids that? It's like, because we think of things. It's kind of like what you said when you thought that, and I had the same thought when I was a kid, and then I heard that too. We're just going to be mindless robots that God controls, and we just serve Him, and that's all we do. It's going to be like a, I don't want to say dictatorship, but it's going to be just like we're His servants,
Right.
you know, and that's our human minds trying to wrap our heads around something like that. And we have, the word serve here means something vastly different. Just like with a lot of other things, it means something vastly different than what God means. And we don't understand his level of understanding. And I think it's just our trying to wrap our tiny human minds around God's infinite wisdom, and you can't. That's why there's so many. It annoys me to no end when people take one little small Bible verse and they try to twist it using that human logic and that human thinking way of thinking. They try to twist it and be like, Bible's not real because of this one little verse. Well, if you take it into the bigger picture there with all the other verses around it and the story that goes along with everything, and you have to put God's view of it into play, then you're wrong. But of course, they don't want to hear that. But it's just we hear things like that. We think when we're younger. It's funny you said that because I thought the same thing. Is like we're just going to be servants, and
Yeah.
but
Kind of a downer, isn't it?
yeah, that's just our human way of thinking. Is something we can't really comprehend until we get there. So,
Yeah.
but uh, yeah, I don't have any other questions right now. But did you have the next? Yeah, one of the next
Yeah.
verses.
Yeah. Um, these are pretty interesting. This is one here that may be the most popular of them all. But the wolf will dwell with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little boy will lead them. Also, the cow and the bear will graze. Their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. The nursing child will play by the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child will put his hand in the viper's den. They will not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. So you can see right there, there's still going to be a ton of animals around. There'll even be snakes still around. But it says that children will be able to basically put their hand in a cobra's den and don't have to worry about being bitten. That lions will graze and eat grass, and that there won't be any dying or killing or anything like that. It's just going to be very different. Um, it's going to be
What
amazing. Oh,
book and verse?
that's Isaiah chapter 11.
Um, what will we eat then? And I mean, is it said, or do we have any idea what we'll eat? Because obviously now we eat a lot of animals.
Well, it talks about and that one that I read earlier about the orchards,
Oh,
um,
that's right. Yep, you said that.
and so it may very well be that we'll become vegetarians. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Don't say that. Then they'll think they're right.
Yeah, there's
I'm kidding, of course.
the Joel Richardson talks about his dad got very excited because there's a one of the Millennium verses talks about canals. And so if there's canals and there's all these animals, there's bound to be fish. So his dad was very excited. They'll still be fishing during the millennium. And so, but you know how it goes. What we just read there doesn't necessarily say that we won't eat meat. It just says that the animals will not be attacking each other and whatnot. So we just don't know. There's Bible refers to the food of angels. The manna that the Israelites ate in the desert was considered the food of angels. And there may be more types of there. I imagine there's going to be all kinds of food that we're not even aware of that will come about during that period. Probably bread like we can only imagine. And so
Well,
it's all
it's often said that people see colors in heaven, and there will be colors in heaven that we don't know exist. So why not food too? Why not other things? Because it's going to be unlike anything we've ever seen.
yeah,
But yeah, I didn't even think about that, the manna that
yeah,
God created. So
yeah,
I'm sure, and we'll have our perfect bodies during the
right,
millennium too, right? Yeah, I think we already talked about that, but
yeah,
yeah, we don't have to worry about working out and trying to stay in shape, eating
no,
eating healthy.
not at
So
all.
I'm sure that'll
And
be a big relief to a lot of people.
that body will be very similar to what you see Jesus has after he's raised from the dead, uh, where he is able to pass through a wall um, with just walk right through it, and yet he's also solid enough to where they can touch his body and they feel that he was a man. And then he sat down and ate, and then just like that, he was gone. So it was a spiritual body. It was a physical body, but it was also one that was not bound by the same limitations that our current earthly bodies, our fallen bodies are. So it'll be an amazing experience, and we'll get those new bodies as soon as the rapture occurs. It will be changed in an instant. So it's and the thing is, the reason why I think you got a good idea to talk about this is because it's, in my humble opinion, the millennium is close. It's very close. Um, it could be less than 7 years off at this point. It could be 4 years off. There's just no real way of knowing. But this is not something I don't think that's going to start decades and decades from now. It's something that'll be it's coming.
Well, we talk about the return of Jesus being imminent, then that means the millennium is imminent, and we've said before that a lot of people, even Christians, the return of Jesus, the end of the age, it scares them. So just talking about excuse me, talking about the millennium, shedding some light on it from the Bible verses, and maybe even some of our thoughts, and we like to speculate.
Right.
Will hopefully bring them some comfort and ease that a little bit. We talked about earlier about God doing that for that gentleman who had the near death experience. So hopefully this, excuse me, comes as a confirmation. And hopefully, if you're a little bit scared heading into this, and you think the end of days is, or the end of the age is here, and it scares you, maybe this will give you a little bit of comfort. And it doesn't seem so bad when we start talking about it now. I mean,
Yeah,
I was never scared. I never thought it was anyway. But for those who are.
yeah, it's extremely exciting to look forward to. It's going to be an amazing experience. It is. I look forward to it a great deal. Um, we do know certain things for a fact. I mean, there's a lot of speculation, but we do know for a fact that the millennium is coming, that it's going to happen. We do know that we'll have um, perfect bodies. We do know that the nations will be so that the Lord will reign from Jerusalem. And so we do know that the end of the world is not coming. It's oftentimes you hear the end of the world, the end of the world. I think we've pretty well demonstrated, as far as the Bible says, the end of the world from right now is at least 1,000 years off, at the very least. It's the end of the world is not. We're not even close to the end of the world. What we're approaching is the end of this age, the age of faith, the church age, and the age of sin and death. That's coming to a close, but the end of the world is still a long ways off. And so we use these terms a lot of times, like the end of the world, and it's not biblical at all.
Right. Yeah, that's why I corrected myself a minute ago when I said the end of days, the end of it,
It is right.
and the end of the age.
Yeah, that's what it is.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah. Did you have any more verses?
There is some smaller ones. Zechariah 14 talks about it. It says, "Then it will come about that any who are left of all the nations that went against Jerusalem will go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to celebrate the Feast of Booths. And it will be that whichever of the families of the earth does not go up to Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, there will be no rain on them. If the family of Egypt does not go up or enter, then no rain will fall on them. It will be the plague which the Lord smites the nations who do not go up to celebrate the feast." So, any nations who uh, drag their heels, it talks about these are nations that have basically are still in existence after the 3.5 years, that they'll be. It's you know it's not going to be an evil dictatorship, but it's not going to be like now where mankind is allowed to make his own rules. It's going to be, we talked about Jesus, the teddy bear, but during the millennium, it's going to be Jesus, the grizzly bear. And he's not going to tolerate rebellion or nonsense. It's going to be a great time. The thing is, when you hear that, you have to remember that the vast majority of people aren't going to want to rebel or misbehave because it's going to be so amazing. So it's almost perfect, period. If you really read into it, you'll see it's not quite perfect. For us, it will be, because we'll be in constant fellowship with the Lord. But for the inhabitants of the nations, it talks about, it'll be a great time. They'll have happy, good lives for long lives. But there will still be a little bit of death. There'll still be a little bit of disobedience now and again. But the Lord will judge it very quickly. And it doesn't say that he'll necessarily, kill people or anything like that, but he'll take action to make sure that they recognize him and follow him. And so that's in Isaiah 65. Again, it says, "I will rejoice over Jerusalem and take delight in my people. The sound of weeping and crying will be heard in it no more. Never again will there be in it an infant who lives but a few days, or an old man who does not live out his years. The one who dies at 100 will be thought a mere child. The one who fails to reach 100 will be considered accursed. They will build houses and dwell in them. They will plant vineyards and eat their fruit. I read that before. Um, and then Isaiah 33, it says, and no resident of Zion will say, I am sick. The people who dwell there will be forgiven of their iniquity. So there won't even be sickness or anything like that.
That sorry, before we get to the last one,
Yeah.
that one mentions infants, and
Yeah.
so
Right.
maybe there will be children born during that
Oh,
age, during
yeah,
the millennium.
there definitely will be amongst the people, the normal.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
I don't know, um, you know, as far as the saints, whether the saints will be, I just don't know. I would hope so, but I'm not sure. And then the last one again is Isaiah, and this is not an exhaustive list. There's plenty of other ones I didn't write down. These are just some of the ones. But Isaiah chapter 2, it says, now it will come about in the last days, the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains. So we've mentioned on this channel before that mountains represent governments in the Bible. When you read about mountains, you're talking about government. So it says that the mountain of the house of the Lord, so the Lord's government, will be established as the chief government. It will be raised above the hills, and all the nations will stream to it. And many peoples will come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us concerning his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For the law will go forth from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem, and he will judge between the nations, and will render decisions for many peoples. And they will hammer their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, and never again will they learn war. And so that pruning hook and plowshare verse is very famous. You hear that a lot, beating the swords into plowshares. And so it does seem from the verses that agriculture will be a big part of the millennium. As far as technology goes and vehicles and all that, I just don't know. There's some reason to think, like I said, in my dream, I was in a mall. And I think at one point I was even driving in a car, but I can't sit here and say for sure that that'll all be the case. I don't think we're all going to become Amish necessarily, as far as just living in log cabins out in the woods. But it's just speculation. All we know is that it's going to be wonderful.
You had mentioned earlier about people being disobedient and not rebelling. That's not the word you use, but they they'll be. I don't want to say trouble either. What was the word you used that Jesus will? What was it? Disobedience.
It was, yeah. There's a little bit of disobedience. It seems like that they addressed there in that one verse.
So we don't have to worry about any of that though as saints, right?
Right. Correct.
Yeah.
That's not referring to us. Yeah. We will not taste death ever again. We will not take. We'll be forgiven, perfected. All that is strictly for the inhabitant. And even in that verse, it says these are the nations that had come against Israel. So they should consider themselves lucky to even still exist after the 3.5 years.
Right. So yeah, we don't have to worry about getting in trouble.
Nope.
That's no.
Yeah.
That's really all I had. I didn't really have any other questions, and none came to mind. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we end it?
No, it's one of those things. Like I said, it's a lot of gray area. There are certain hard, fast things that we know for sure about it. There's a lot of things that we can only surmise. So, but we do know it's coming, and we do know it's going to be an amazing period. 1,000 years is a long time. Think about 400 years ago was when Jamestown occurred, and that seems like forever ago, and that's not even half the millennium. So it's going to be a long period. It's going to be great, and that'll be followed by eternity and the final eternity of heaven. So.
Right, and it's definitely something exciting to look forward to. I definitely do.
The last thing I'll say is I may have mentioned this before. I heard an expression one time that there was once a giant rock that was 100 miles long and 100 miles tall and 100 miles wide. And every year, a sparrow would fly in and land on this rock that was 100 miles tall and 100 miles wide and 100 miles long, and would sharpen his beak on that rock. And then the sparrow would fly off until the following year he would come back and land and sharpen his beak. When that rock is whittled down to the size of a pebble, that's one day in eternity. So that gives you an idea of how long eternity is.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, I was gonna say it sounds like paradise. Because it is going to be paradise. So, I mean, that's what we have to look forward to. And
Yeah.
like I mentioned before, if you were a little concerned about the end and Jesus coming and not getting to, if you're younger and you worried about not getting to live out your full life, then you're going to have 1,000 year period where you definitely get to. And hopefully this brought some people some comfort, because it's a scary thing for a lot of people when you start talking about the end of days, or I said it again, the end of the age, and
Right.
Jesus returning, and the tribulation, and whether we're going to be here or not. And there's huge debate about when the rapture takes place, and some even if the rapture will take place. But even David Jeremiah in that sermon said today that we will be taken out of the earth from the rapture,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then the tribulation, and then we come back for the 1,000 year period. So, you know, don't take don't take my word for it. David Jeremiah said it. He's much more knowledgeable on this stuff than I am. So I wouldn't even put myself in the same ballpark as him. But oh, we mentioned before that some of the stuff that we talked about tonight is fact. Some of it comes from the Bible and it is fact. Other stuff that we talked about is pure speculation on our part. And I think we did a good job throughout the episode determining which was which was which. But if you have any questions or anything, just put them in the comments, or email us. We put our email in the description of the videos, and we'll do our best to get back to you with that, or maybe even answer them in the next episode. Maybe if we get enough questions, we can have a follow up episode just answering those questions. A little short question and answer there too. But I don't know, if you're a Christian and you have a relationship with the Lord, this should just excite you even more. I'm even more excited about it now after we sat here and talked about it for about an hour than I was before. Especially, I don't even know why I didn't even think that I'll be able to see God during a 1,000 year period. I'll be able to just go see Jesus whenever I want to. And what more could you want? I mean, I think about coming face to face with Jesus in heaven, but even before that, I'll be able to during the 1,000 year reign. So, I, that I honestly don't know why that slipped through, but it did. And that just, if nothing else, we talked about tonight, which pretty much everything did get me even more excited. That definitely does. But if you didn't have anything else, I'll go ahead and close this out. We don't do this for the views or the likes or to try to make money off this channel. You'll never see a store on the page selling $25 t-shirts or anything like that. We just want to spread hope, and we want to try to reach the lost, and we want to try to convey the messages in these episodes that we feel like the Lord has called upon us to do. We feel like this is our calling from the Lord to start this podcast, and we want it. That's one reason why we did. Another reason is why is because some of the topics we talk about don't get talked about at all. Like I said at the beginning, the 1,000 year period, the millennium, you don't hardly hear anything about it. And like you said, as we're getting closer to the end, it's a good idea to remind people how good we're going to have it after Jesus comes back. And we want you to be a part of that. If you're a non-believer and you're watching this, then now's the time. Get right with Jesus before it's too late. And we've talked about this before too, how after he comes back or after you die, it's too late. You have to make that choice right now, with your own free will, you have to choose Jesus. Because once you die, I've heard in many of these near death experiences, once you die, it's too late and your decision is made. So that's why it's so important. That's why Christians try to stress as much as we can that you have to choose him now. Now, now, now. And it's even more urgent now than it has been. I would in history, because we're getting close to the end. This is what it's all leading up to. This is what it's all building toward. And if if all of that scares you, then that should be your sign right there that you need to get right with the Lord. If you are saved and you're scared, then start developing that relationship with God. Start praying every day. Start reading your Bible, and He makes it very, very easy. We've talked about it in episodes before how easy it is and how accepting He is of everybody. Everybody. We like to think of the historical figures from the Bible as perfect people. They're anything but. They're anything but. Some of them, I don't want to besmirch any of their names, but they and another thing that we like to say is if Jerry and I can do it, anybody can do it. We're just two random guys, and it was made very easy for us. So yeah, that's all I had. Like I mentioned, we don't do this for the views or the likes or to try to get internet famous or anything. We just want to spread the gospel, and that's why we're here. So thank you for watching, and hopefully, if you're new, we'll see you at the next episode. God bless.